The bells of King's Landing rang heavy in the air, louder than usual, as if they knew something terrible was about to happen. The sun hadn't even climbed all the way up the sky, and already the city felt uneasy. Servants rushed about with lowered eyes, avoiding conversation. Nobles sat stiffly at breakfast, their words dry and measured. Everyone felt the weight of the Queen's hand tightening around the realm, but none dared speak of it. Queen Cersei Lannister stood at the window of the Red Keep, watching the city like a hawk circling over prey. Her golden hair, always perfectly arranged, shimmered in the morning light. She wore her signature red and gold, the Lion of Lannister bold on her chest. Her beauty hadn't faded with time, but her eyes were colder now, sharper, like glass that had cracked but hadn't yet shattered. Below her, in a room filled with too many guards and not enough light, sat her son, Tommen Baratheon, the Boy King, still barely a man. He sat on the Iron Throne, legs swinging lightly off the edge, his crown just slightly too big for his head. He looked more like a lost child than a ruler of Westeros. But Cersei had plans that didn't care for his youth, his softness, or his innocence. "I will not allow the Faith to control this kingdom," she had told him the night before, pacing the room like a lioness preparing to strike. "They humiliate your wife, your queen. They humiliate you." Tommen had sat silently then too, eyes fixed on the floor, his fingers twitching in his lap. He loved Margaery. She had been kind to him in a way his mother never had. With her he could laugh, he could be soft. But his mother didn't believe in softness. She believed in power. And power was not something she gave up easily. That morning, as Tommen sat on the throne, he remembered Margaery's face behind the prison bars, pale and frightened. The Scepters had stripped her of her title, her dignity, and nearly her will, all because of the Faith militant. And yet, as much as he wanted to help her, to free her, he couldn't, not without defying his mother. Cersei had warned him of betrayal before, that Margaery was playing her own game, using her beauty and charm to bend him. But Tommen in his heart believed in love. He believed Margaery saw something in him worth holding on to, that she wasn't like the others. But Cersei didn't trust belief. She only trusted control. Later that day, Cersei summoned Kevan Lannister and a few other small council members into her chambers. "The boy is too weak," she said flatly, pouring herself a glass of wine. "He can't make the hard decisions, so I will make them for him." Kevan looked uncomfortable, but he said nothing. He'd learned long ago that Cersei didn't take disagreement lightly. And now, with the High Sparrow growing more powerful by the day, the city buzzing with unrest, and the nobles split in loyalty, the Queen Mother held more power than ever before. "I want the sept blown to the ground," she said, not even blinking. Every last stone turned to ash. Kevin's jaw dropped. "Cersei, your son is the king. This is his rule, not yours." Her smile was thin, deadly. "He rules nothing. He merely sits. I command," and that was the truth no one dared to say aloud. Tommen had the crown, but Cersei had the power. And now her fear of losing it, especially to the Faith, to Margaery, to anyone, was driving her to madness. But Cersei didn't see it that way. She saw herself as the last protector of her son, the only one who truly knew what he needed, even if he didn't. She told herself that the day she destroyed the sept, it would be the day she set him free from everyone who had tried to manipulate him. She had no idea it would also be the day she broke him forever. The wind howled across the stone walls of the Red Keep that night. It was colder than usual. Cersei sat alone in her chambers, lit only by the soft flicker of candlelight. Her fingers circled the rim of her wine cup, but she wasn't drinking. She was thinking, planning. Every move had to be precise. The High Sparrow had made her crawl once. He had paraded her shame through the streets of King's Landing. She would return that humiliation with fire. But her plan wasn't just about revenge. It was survival. If the Faith kept rising, if Margaery continued to sway Tommen, Cersei's influence would vanish. She wouldn't just lose her power, she would lose her son. Tommen, meanwhile, hadn't been able to sleep. He lay in his chambers, wide-eyed, staring at the canopy above his bed. The crown on the bedside table caught the moonlight, its golden edges gleaming like a warning. He reached for it, touched its cool metal, and then pulled his hand away. He didn't feel like a king. Not really. Kings made decisions. Kings weren't puppets. He thought of Margaery's last words to him when she was allowed to visit, just for a moment. "You're not a boy anymore, Tommen," she had whispered, her voice trembling. "You can end this. You must. But how?" His mother had guards watching him around the clock. Pycelle avoided him. Kevin didn't listen. The Faith had taken his queen, and his mother had taken his voice. He had no allies, only a title. Cersei's plan moved quickly. She bribed a few pyromancers, old and secretive men who still knew the deep, tunnels beneath the sept of Baelor, forgotten paths lined with barrels of wildfire from the reign of the Mad King. She arranged for the trial of Loras Tyrell and herself to be held the same day. She sent just enough information to make sure Margaery would be there too, and she waited. On the morning of the trial, Tommen dressed in silence. His king's guard stood awkwardly around him, avoiding his eyes. His mother had told him he wouldn't need to attend the trial in person. "It's all formality," she had said sweetly, touching his cheek. "Stay here, rest, I'll see justice done." He had nodded, not because he agreed, but because resistance felt pointless. Then the hour arrived. Margaery, dressed in white, stood inside the sept beside her brother, her face pale but proud. The High Sparrow began to speak, but there was unease in the air. Lancel Lannister, one of the Faith's own, had vanished minutes before. The Sparrow's smile faltered. Something wasn't right. Margaery felt it too. "We need to leave," she whispered, turning to the others. "Now, something's wrong." But the Faith didn't listen to her. She was a woman, a prisoner, a Tyrell. Her warnings were dismissed as panic. And then the floor trembled. A low rumble echoed from deep below. And then fire. The sept of Baelor erupted in green flame. A monstrous pillar of wildfire shot into the sky, swallowing stone, flesh, and bone. The stained glass shattered outward, raining deadly shards across the city. Screams followed, but not for long. There was nothing left to scream about. Everyone inside was incinerated in seconds. From the Red Keep, Tommen saw it all. He had run to the window when he felt the blast, and he stood frozen, eyes wide, lips parted, as the smoke curled into the heavens. His breath caught in his throat. He couldn't see her face, but he knew Margaery was in there. His knees buckled. He sank to the floor like a broken doll. His hands trembled violently as he clutched at his chest. He wanted to scream, but no sound came out. There was just a ringing in his ears, the kind that comes when the world collapses. A few moments later, Cersei entered, dressed in black. Not a word of comfort, not even a glance. She looked upon her son as if checking on a room being cleaned. "It had to be done," she said, her voice flat. "They were enemies of the crown." Tommen didn't respond. He couldn't. Something inside him had died with Margaery. He had never felt powerful, but now he didn't even feel alive. His body was still breathing, but his spirit had left the room. Cersei believed she had removed all threats. But what she didn't know was that her greatest mistake wasn't killing Margaery. It was letting her son live to witness it. The days after the explosion were filled with smoke, mourning, and strange, heavy silence. The city was stunned. No one knew how to respond. Nobles whispered behind closed doors. Commoners kept their heads down, afraid of speaking truths that might get them killed. The sept of Baelor, once the heart of faith and tradition in King's Landing, was now just a blackened hole in the earth. But the Red Keep, it stood tall, untouched, like it had always known fire would never touch it. Cersei Lannister moved through its halls like a queen already crowned. Her enemies were dead. Her trial was gone. Her son still sat on the throne. As far as she was concerned, it was a victory. She believed that with the faith gone and the Tyrells in ashes, her son would finally see what she had been trying to show him all along, that love was weakness and power was survival. But Tommen hadn't spoken in 2 days. Not a word. Not even to Sir Gregor, who guarded his door, or Qyburn, who now whispered advice in place of Pycelle. He barely ate. He didn't sleep. He didn't even cry. He simply sat in silence, crown in his lap, staring out the same window where he had watched the sept burn. Cersei visited him only once. "Tommen," she said softly, her tone wrapped in false warmth. "I know this is difficult, but in time you'll understand. We had to act. You're safe now." Still, he said nothing. She stood beside him, tried to place her hand on his shoulder, but he pulled away without a word. Her smile faltered. She straightened up and said coldly, "You are the king. Act like one." And then she left. Tommen didn't even look at her as the door closed. That night, he sat alone again, still wearing the same clothes from 2 days before. His crown, untouched, rested on the armrest beside him. He looked down at it, just gold and jewels, just metal. It felt heavier now than it ever had. Not on his head, but on his soul. He could still see Margaery in his mind. Her soft smile, the way she touched his hand, how she made him feel like he mattered, like he wasn't just a pawn. She had never raised her voice to him, never belittled him. She had loved him in a way that didn't suffocate. And now she was gone, burned, along with her brother, along with her family, all of it, in one monstrous green flash. Tommen hadn't lost a queen. He had lost the last piece of himself that still believed he could be good. That morning he rose early. He bathed, dressed in fresh robes, and placed the crown gently on his head. He didn't call for guards. He didn't announce his intentions. He simply walked the halls quietly, passing servants who bowed, not realizing they were looking at a boy who had already decided he was no longer king. He returned to the window. The same one. The very same window that had offered him the view of Margaery's death. And for the first time in days, he let out a breath. Not a sob, not a word, just a breath. Then he set his crown down on the windowsill, straightened his back, and stepped forward. The fall was fast. By the time the guards found him, it was already done. His small, broken body lay twisted at the base of the Red Keep, robes fluttering gently in the wind, as if the world itself was trying to shield him from the shame of how it had ended. The boy king who never truly ruled had made his final decision, and it was silence. News spread quickly through the castle and then through the city. At first, no one believed it. Then the mourning began again, but this time it wasn't just the death of a king. It was the confirmation that something was deeply wrong at the heart of the realm. Cersei stood over her son's body, eyes dry. There were no tears, not because she didn't care, but because she refused to admit that she had caused it, that she had pushed him too far, that in trying to save him she had destroyed him. "He was too gentle for this world," she said quietly. But in her heart, a whisper answered her, "No, he was too gentle for you." The great hall of the Red Keep was colder than ever when they laid Tommen's body to rest. No bells rang this time. No songs were sung. No crowds gathered in mourning. He was buried quietly beneath the sept that no longer existed, ashes placed where fire had erased everything. A boy king without a realm, a soul without justice. Cersei didn't wear mourning black. She wore red. Red, like the lion on her chest. Red like blood. Red like power. She stood alone at the head of the empty chamber, looking down at the carved stone box that held what remained of her last child. Her golden boy, her soft boy, her son, and yet her eyes were dry, her face unreadable. She didn't flinch when the doors closed behind her, leaving her with the silence and the consequences. Behind the walls, the court was already shifting. The small council, what was left of it, whispered urgently. The Tyrells were gone. The Martells had vanished into silence. The Baratheon line had quietly ended. The Starks remained in the north, distant and defiant. There was no one left, no name to rule. No one but her. Euban entered the chamber hours later, step slow, voice low. "The lords are gathering. They seek leadership. They seek a ruler." Cersei did not look at him. She continued to stare at the cold box where Tommen rested. "They'll follow strength," she said at last. "And they'll fear fire." Qyburn nodded. "Shall I prepare the coronation, Your Grace?" A pause, just one breath long. Yes, so it was done. No Targaryen blood, no blessing from the faith, no husband to claim the throne for her. Cersei Lannister crowned herself with her son's still warm crown. Not as Queen Regent, not as Queen Mother, as Queen of the Seven Kingdoms. It should have been a triumph. Instead, it was a funeral wrapped in gold. When she walked into the throne room days later to accept the crown, silence greeted her. The nobility did not cheer. The lords did not smile. Even the candles burned low, as if unsure whether to celebrate or mourn. Sir Jaime Lannister stood by the door, his jaw tight, his eyes unreadable. He had returned too late. He had seen the sept smoking from miles away, his heart sinking with each step closer to the city. And now his sister, his lover, stood in black and red wearing their son's crown, without a tear on her cheek. His voice was cold that night when they finally stood alone. "Tommen is dead." "Yes," she answered, her tone steady. "You blew up the sept." "I did. You killed Margaery. You pushed Tommen. You broke him." Cersei turned to face him, something fierce in her gaze. "He was weak. He was your son." Her silence was deafening. Then she said softly, "He was going to destroy us." Jaime's knuckles clenched. "No, you destroyed him. You fed him fear and called it protection. You built your power on his silence and called it love. And when he couldn't take the weight, he chose death over you." Cersei flinched, just barely, but it was the closest thing to truth she'd allowed in days. Still, her face hardened again. "You don't understand. I had no choice." "You always had a choice," Jaime said bitterly. "You just never liked the ones that didn't make you queen." The words cut deeper than any blade. But Cersei didn't respond, because deep down she knew he was right. She hadn't just lost a son. She had used him, molded him, controlled him, all in the name of safety, all in the name of Lannister legacy. But what legacy was left? Joffrey poisoned, Myrcella murdered, Tommen shattered. She had burned down a religion, destroyed the most powerful house in the south, and crowned herself queen, but at the cost of her children's lives. They had been her reason for everything, and now they were gone. She sat alone that night on the Iron Throne, the metal cold against her back. No music played, no celebration rang out, only silence. The throne room had never felt so large, or so empty. In the shadows, whispers began to grow, that she was mad, that she had become the female echo of Eris, the mad queen, that she wore the crown not by right, but by force. But Cersei Lannister didn't care. Let them whisper, let them fear. She would rule alone, even if the throne itself turned against her. The throne room had never been quieter. The Iron Throne, that cruel, jagged seat of power, gleamed under the dim light of the torches. Each blade twisted toward her like a silent accusation. Cersei sat upon it now, not as mother, not as regent, but as queen. No husband beside her, no son to protect, no family to shield her from the cold truth that she had no one left to love her and no one left to betray her. Her crown felt heavier than it looked. It pressed against her temples like thorns. It was Tommen's crown, reshaped slightly to fit her, yet it still smelled faintly of innocence, of something she had lost long ago. The lords of the realm stood below the steps, stiff and uneasy. They bowed when they were told, but not one of them smiled. Even in victory, Cersei could see the fear in their eyes. And beneath that fear, something sharper, doubt. She had won the game, but no one wanted to play with her anymore. That night, Cersei walked through the Red Keep alone. She didn't trust the servants, not anymore. Most of them whispered when they thought she couldn't hear. The halls that once rang with the laughter of her children now echoed with emptiness. She paused at Tommen's old chamber. The door had been sealed since his death, but the key still hung on her belt. For a long time, she stared at the handle, her hand hovering above it. Then quietly she turned it and stepped inside. The air was stale. The bed was still made. His toys were still in their places, the little wooden lions, the painted soldiers. A single crown sat on the table beside the window. The same window. Cersei walked to it, her chest tightening as the memory rushed back. The sunlight had been cruel that day, bright and sharp when Tommen stepped forward, soft and final when he fell. She could still hear the faint sound of the crown clattering to the floor. Her fingers trembled as she touched the sill. "You were supposed to be strong," she whispered. "You were supposed to be mine." She turned away quickly, angry at the sting in her eyes. She had promised herself there would be no more tears. Tears were weakness. Tears were how the world had learned to beat her. Qyburn found her there a short while later. "Your Grace," he said, bowing his head, "the people are uneasy. There are riots near Flea Bottom. The food stores are thin. And there are rumors, wild ones, that the gods are punishing us for the sept." Cersei smiled faintly. "Let them believe it. Fear will keep them quiet." "But fear," Qyburn said softly, "also burns." She turned to him, her voice ice. "So does loyalty when it turns cold." He bowed lower. "As you say, Your Grace." When he left, she stayed by the window, staring at the city that had once adored her father, feared her husband, and now whispered against her. The fires had died, but the scent of smoke still clung to the air, a reminder of what she had done, and what she would do again if anyone defied her. That night sleep would not come. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Tommen, not the king, not the crown, but the boy who used to cling to her hand when storms frightened him. The boy who used to ask if she believed in heaven. The boy who used to smile when she told him lions never die. And then she would see him fall again. The dreams became darker with each passing night. Sometimes it was Joffrey's laughter echoing through the halls, sharp and mocking. Sometimes it was Myrcella's soft voice calling her name from the shore of Dawn. But it was always Tommen's silence that followed, always the sound of a body hitting stone. By the third week, even wine couldn't chase the ghosts away. Jaime avoided her. He spent his nights drinking with the soldiers, his golden hand tapping against his cup in restless rhythm. When he did speak to her, his words were short, bitter, distant. "You've built a throne out of ashes," he said once. "Don't be surprised when the wind blows it away." She had wanted to scream at him, to slap him, to remind him that she had done it all for their children, for their family. But the words wouldn't come, because deep down she knew it wasn't for them. It had been for her. Her game had become her only reason to live, and now that she had won, she found there was nothing left to play for. Still, she refused to stop. If the people hated her, she would make them fear her. If the nobles doubted her, she would crush them. If the gods themselves despised her, then she would become her own god. Because Cersei Lannister had one truth left to cling to, one belief that burned brighter than any faith or crown. That power was the only thing that could never betray her, even if it cost her everything else. The Red Keep had never felt so empty, yet so full of whispers. Servants no longer lingered in the halls. They moved like shadows, quick and silent, afraid to draw her gaze. The small folk in the city spoke her name only in secret, behind closed doors and beneath their breath. The Queen of Ashes, they called her. The Mad Lioness. The Widow of the Flame. Cersei pretended not to care. She told herself fear was loyalty, and loyalty in any form was enough. But the truth was, she could feel it. The distance, the cold, the unease that seemed to breathe through every stone of the castle she once ruled like a queen of light. Even Jaime's footsteps no longer echoed in her chambers. He slept elsewhere now, drank more than he spoke. When he looked at her, there was something in his eyes that cut deeper than a blade. Not anger, not even hate, just pity. And Cersei Lannister would rather be hated than pitied. So she kept her crown. She wore it to breakfast, to council meetings, even when she walked the halls at night. If the world would not love her, then it would bow to her image. Qyburn was her only constant companion now. His presence, thin and quiet, gave her a strange comfort. He never questioned, never doubted, never judged. When others flinched at the mention of wildfire, he smiled. When others feared the rumors of rebellion, he promised solutions, sharp and final. "The people are restless, Your Grace," he told her one morning, as they stood in the council chamber. "They whisper that you've angered the gods." Cersei's eyes narrowed. "There are no gods, only those who rule and those who kneel. But kneeling," Qyburn said softly, "can turn to rising when backs grow tired." Her lips curved in a faint smile. "Then we'll break their knees before they stand." He bowed slightly. "As you command." That was how she handled the first revolt, swiftly, brutally. When bread ran short and the streets filled with cries for food, she sent gold cloaks to silence them. Hundreds died in the square, their blood running into the gutters. For 3 days the stench of it filled the air, and yet not a single protest rose again. She told herself it was necessary. Order must come before mercy. Fear must come before peace. But each night, when the castle grew quiet, the ghosts returned. She would lie awake in her vast, lonely bed and hear footsteps, soft, light, almost hesitant, moving down the hallway. Once she swore she heard the faint sound of a child's voice whispering her name. "Mother!" She had leapt from her bed, heart pounding, candle shaking in her hand. But when she opened the door, the corridor was empty. Only the flicker of torchlight on stone remained. By the fifth night, she stopped sleeping altogether. Wyvern noticed, of course. "You look tired, Your Grace," he murmured. "I don't sleep well," she replied, voice cold. He tilted his head slightly. Guilt is a poor companion for rest. Her glare could have killed him on the spot. "I feel no guilt," he bowed. Of course not. But she did. Deep down, beneath the armor of pride, beneath the mask of the queen, guilt was spreading like rot. Not for her enemies. She had none left who mattered, but for her children. She saw Tommen's eyes everywhere, in the polished silver goblets, in the reflections on her wine, even in the flames of the candles that burned too long in her chambers. Those blue eyes, wide and sad, staring at her as if asking, why? Why had she played this game so long that even love had turned into a weapon? Jaime saw it too, her slow unraveling. "You think you've won," he told her one evening, his voice slurred with drink. "But there's nothing left to rule, Cersei. Only ashes and ghosts." She turned to him, the faintest tremor in her voice. "I have the throne," he shook his head. "You have a chair made of swords." "Nothing more." His words lingered long after he left. For the first time in her life, Cersei found herself staring at the Iron Throne and wondering if it had ever truly belonged to anyone, or if it only consumed those foolish enough to sit on it. She dreamed that night, a rare, dark dream. She was standing in the throne room, the walls burning, smoke rising all around her. The Iron Throne glowed red-hot, and from its base spilled rivers of green wildfire. She heard laughter, faint and mocking, Joffrey's laugh, high and cruel, and then Tommen's voice, soft and sad, saying, "Mother, come down." She reached for him, but the crown on her head began to melt, searing her scalp. When she tried to pull it off, it fused to her skin. And as she screamed, the flames swallowed her whole. Cersei woke, gasping, drenched in sweat, gripping her chest like she'd been stabbed. For a long while she sat there in the dark, trembling. Then slowly she whispered to herself, "They're gone, all of them. Gone because they were weak." But even as she said it, she felt the lie in her own mouth. They weren't weak, they were human, and she had become something else entirely. Winter had finally come to King's Landing. The cold rolled in from the north, sharp and unnatural for the southern capital. It swept through the cracks of the Red Keep, curling around the pillars and freezing the marble floors. The chill should have been unbearable, but Cersei welcomed it. She thought of it as a cleansing wind, the world bowing before her rule. Outside the castle, the city starved. Famine followed the fires. With the Tyrells dead, no grain came from the Reach. The docks were nearly empty, and what few ships arrived were taken by force to feed the crown's soldiers. The common folk whispered that the gods had turned away, that even the sea refused to feed a kingdom ruled by sin. Cersei ignored it all. She rarely left the throne room anymore. She sat on the Iron Throne for hours, her posture perfect, her face expressionless. She looked less like a queen and more like a statue carved of pale stone. The courtiers who came to petition her left, trembling. The ones who complained too loudly simply vanished. Each disappearance brought her a strange sense of calm. Each enemy removed was another piece of order restored. Or so she told herself. Only Jaime dared to speak plainly to her now. He came one evening long after the council had gone, his armor half removed, his golden hand gleaming in the candlelight. "You can't keep killing everyone who disagrees with you," he said, voice low but firm. Cersei didn't look at him. "I'm not killing them. I'm saving the realm from traitors. Traitors! Or witnesses." Her head turned slowly, her eyes narrowing. "Do you think me a monster, Jaime?" "I think," he said, stepping closer, "that you've forgotten who you're fighting for. There's no one left to protect." She rose from the throne, her gown whispering against the stone steps. "You don't understand. They all wanted to use him. Margaery, the Sparrow, the Council. They would have destroyed him, just like they destroyed Father. I had to stop them. Tommen was a child, Jaime said softly. He needed love, not your wars. For a moment she looked as if she might cry. Her lips trembled, her voice broke just slightly. I loved him more than my life. Then why couldn't you let him live it? The words hit harder than any sword. Jaime left her there, frozen in place, staring at the empty throne. That night, she ordered Qyburn to increase the guard patrols and double the watch on every gate. There are enemies everywhere, she told him. Even in the castle. Qyburn bowed, but there was something in his eyes, something calculating, almost cautious. Even he had begun to fear the monster he had helped create. As the days passed, the isolation grew unbearable. The silence pressed in on her from all sides. Sometimes she spoke just to hear her own voice. She found herself talking to the empty air, to her father's ghost, to her children's memories. She would pour 2 cups of wine and set one on the table across from her. For you, Tommen, she whispered once. A toast to the lion who couldn't roar. The wind outside howled in response, rattling the windows. Her paranoia soon turned inward. She began suspecting even the servants. When her handmaiden dropped a cup, Cersei ordered her whipped. When a guard stumbled in his report, she had him hanged for lying. The castle became a place of whispers and dread. No one slept easily, and yet the more she tightened her grip, the more the realm slipped away. Ravens brought word of enemies rising. The north was rallying under a wolf banner again. Daenerys Targaryen had crossed the sea with her dragons. The Reach was stirring with survivors who wanted vengeance for Margaery. Even the Riverlands had turned against her. Cersei laughed when she heard it, a hard, hollow laugh. Let them come, she said. I've beaten better, but her eyes betrayed her. There was fear there, deep, quiet fear, the kind that doesn't show until it's too late. One evening she went to the royal crypts for the first time since Tommen's burial. She dismissed the guards and walked the long, torchlit corridor alone. Dust hung in the air like ghosts waiting for her to join them. She stopped before the stone tombs of her children. Joffrey, Myrcella, Tommen, 3 names carved in perfect letters, 3 crowns sculpted above them. Her hand trembled as she touched the cold stone. You were supposed to be my legacy, she whispered. My lions, her voice cracked. Now I rule alone, and they still call me weak. In that moment, for the first time in years, she felt small, smaller than the kingdom, smaller than the throne, smaller even than the lies she'd built around her heart. But the moment passed. She straightened, wiped her eyes, and turned away from the tombs. By the time she reached the top of the stairs again, the mask was back in place. The Queen of the 7 Kingdoms did not weep. As she stepped into the pale light of morning, a raven flew overhead, black against the red sky. Qyburn met her in the hall, his face grave. Your Grace, he said, a fleet has been sighted, massive, flying the dragon's banner. Cersei's lips curved into a faint, cruel smile. Then the game begins again. But deep inside her, a quiet voice whispered a truth she could no longer silence. She had already lost long before the dragons came. The bells rang again, not for a wedding, not for a funeral. They rang in surrender, as the great bells of King's Landing tolled, echoing across rooftops and alleyways. Cersei stood at the highest tower of the Red Keep, watching the horizon burn. The sea beyond the city churned with enemy ships, sails painted black and red, dragons flying above them. She had heard the dragons before she saw them. Their roars cracked the sky like thunder, their wings casting long, devouring shadows over the city walls. Her soldiers, once proud, had begun deserting. The Gold Company broke in the first charge. The Lannister banners were falling like dead leaves. Still she would not run. She wore her crown, her armor, and the same cold expression she had trained into her bones. Qyburn stood beside her, face pale. Your Grace, we must leave. There's still time. No! Her voice was sharp, final. I will not crawl. I will not run from a girl with dragons. This is my city. She will burn it to the ground. Then I will burn with it. She didn't say it out of bravery. Not truly. She said it because there was nothing left. The throne had become her tomb long ago. Tommen, Joffrey, Myrcella, each step toward power had taken a piece of her, until nothing remained but fire and stone. When the first wave of fire struck the outer wall, the ground trembled beneath her feet. The tower windows glowed green and red as dragonfire clashed with hidden caches of wildfire, bursting in a sickening storm of flame. Soldiers screamed. Children cried. Buildings collapsed like rotted paper. And still the bells rang. Jaime came for her in the smoke. His face was bruised, his golden hand dented from the fight, his eyes red from tears and soot. He found her at the foot of the throne, alone. The iron throne loomed above her like a final curse, its blades gleaming in the firelight. You have to come with me, he said, reaching for her. The tunnels beneath the keep. We can escape through the cellar. Cersei turned slowly. For the first time in weeks, her face cracked. Her voice was no longer cruel, no longer cold. I don't want to die here, Jaime. Then don't. He took her hand, the hand she once used to guide her children, and pulled her toward the stairwell. But outside, the city was falling. The halls they had once ruled now collapsed around them. The floor split. The ceiling groaned. The dragon roared again. They ran through smoke and blood, through corridors filled with ash and crumbling stone. Every room was empty, like the ghosts had already left. When they reached the cellar beneath the Red Keep, it was nearly too late. The walls were caving in, the stones collapsing around the dragon skulls. The way out was blocked. The exit Jaime had promised. Gone. Cersei turned in panic. There's no way out. We're going to die. Jaime caught her by the face. Look at me. Tears filled her eyes. I don't want to die, Jaime, not like this. Not alone. You're not alone, he whispered. Not now. The stones above them cracked. And then the ceiling came down. The Red Keep, the fortress built on blood and lies, buried them both beneath its bones. Above, the dragon flew in circles, roaring over a city made of fire and ruin. Below, silence claimed the last of House Lannister. When the fires cooled and the smoke cleared, only rubble remained. The Iron Throne, melted and twisted, sat in a pool of ash where once kings and queens had ruled. No one found Tommen's name in the songs that followed. No ballads told of his kindness. No statues were carved in his honor. He was a boy lost in a game he never chose to play, a gentle soul broken by the ambitions of others. But his ghost lingered, in the silence of the Red Keep, in the empty window that faced the ruined sept, in the eyes of every innocent who saw what power without love could do. And as for Cersei Lannister, she ruled for a time. She won for a moment. But in the end, the same game she thought she mastered destroyed the one thing she ever claimed to love. Her son, her legacy, herself.